Howdy folks, today I want to talk about circle to land approaches and the sort of inherent dangers and mistakes you make just being a human flying these approaches. And there's a really good example at Portland Troutdale Airport. It's the RNAV GPS Alpha approach. And there's a couple interesting things about it. One of them is that the only minimum is a circling minimum. So there's 1,000 foot circling minimum. There's no other approach minimums. And another thing that's interesting is the approach course between the intermediate fix and the final approach course is 008 and then 019 between the final approach course and the runway. So you've got to remember that there's a turn there in between your intermediate fix and your final approach fix. But perhaps the most interesting is this. So the alignment of the final approach course and the runway is completely off. And obviously that's why there's a circle to land minimum and not a straight in minimum. But you can see, I mean, there's almost a 50-degree angle between the approach course and runway 7. And 25 is also pretty intense too. Now it's a towered airport, but it's not all day. So there are times where it's untowered. And there's different ways you could enter the pattern. It's left traffic for both runways. But in this flight, I chose to do a teardrop into the left downwind for runway 7. So that means crossing the runway, staying within that 1.3 nautical mile safety buffer that you get with a circling minimum, and then entering the left downwind to land runway 7. Because you can't make that left turn to try and get into like a right base for runway 7. So it starts right here in between the final approach fix and the missed approach point. We've just crossed through the 1180 step down at the funnel or at Fair, and we're coming up on the missed approach point. And you'll see, so I've set the cloud layer to be almost exactly at the MDA. So we're kind of going in and out of the clouds, and it's just sort of a natural thing that you really should be staying at circling minimum until you're set up to land. But in human nature, you kind of want to duck under, and especially with it right at the MDA, you'll see that I sort of incidentally go back and forth through it. So let's take a look. All right, like I said, it's hard IMC. We're coming through 1180. We're descending down to that 1,000. My descent rate's way too much here, but I'm trying to get down to that 1,000. Ooh, boom, there's a runway. Okay, so maybe I can do this. Maybe I can stay at that 1,000-foot MDA until I get all the way through the teardrop. I get to my, established on my downwind. Maybe it'll be fine. But you can see I'm definitely scud running. I mean, the clouds are right there, and I've got the runway. There's some decent visibility. I happen to know that that coastline is right inside that 1.3 buffer where you get 300 feet of obstacle clearance. So I know that if I make it to that river and then start my turn, I'll be inside it, or if I turn just inside the river. But I have to make sure that I'm keeping that altitude. You can see, it's hard to be that low, to be trying to stay below the clouds because you really want that VFR visibility, the ability to navigate, but you also need to be staying safe. So you can see, boom, just in that amount of time, making the decision about missed approach or not, I lost the runway. And now I'm back hard IMC. At that point, I probably should have gone missed, but boom, there's the runway again. So it kind of gets you in this in and out. Like, should I stick with this? Should I go missed? You really have to decide, I'm going missed, I'm going missed, I'm planning to go missed. If I get lucky, I'm going to make this approach and sort of commit to it because, okay, I've got the runway again. I'm feeling okay about it. I know I'm coming up on the Columbia River. You can see my DME on the VOR is about 1.0, so I'm staying within, starting my turn. Try and keep a standard rate, try and keep it at your 1,000 feet, but you're also constantly looking to make sure you keep that runway in sight because again, it's a little bit dubious. I've lost the runway completely. Spatial disorientation could kick in here. I'm in a turn, I'm real low to the ground. And if you watch as I'm making this turn, because I've lost the runway, maybe I should be continuing my right turn and just going back to the runway, starting my missed approach from there. But you just want to stick with it. And you say, oh, okay, I popped out. I caught the runway. Okay, I'm good. And I lost a little altitude. So keep myself back up to the MDA. And I realized, it's a shallower turn than it needs to be. So just sort of implicitly, if you look at my attitude indicator, you can see now I've overbanked it. Not a good thing to be doing, super low to the ground. And you're just kind of scud running. All right, check my gumps, lining up for downwind. And, it's doable from this point, but it is a risky maneuver, especially overbanked at approach speed coming up. And you really have to be careful. So thought that was kind of an interesting one at Portland Troutdale. Let me know what you think.